2:41 a.m. I turned into my driveway expecting silence, and instead found the worst break-in attempt I'd seen since my law enforcement days. 3 fake HOA inspectors, 1 crowbar, 1 cheap vest still wearing its store tag, and absolutely 0 brain cells between them. They were halfway through my garage door when I pulled up. I wasn't gone more than 30, maybe 35 minutes at most. All I needed was a compression fitting, a roll of fibre conduit, and a half-decent espresso from the only cafe in town that didn't taste like burned plastic. Just a quick trip, nothing out of the ordinary. And as I headed back home, I remember thinking, it's going to be a quiet afternoon. The kind of quiet only 10 acres of pine and dry Colorado wind can give you. Out here, silence isn't a luxury, it's a companion. So when I eased off the main road, flicked on my turn signal, and rolled onto my gravel drive, I expected the same stillness I'd had for years. But life doesn't always hand you stillness. Sometimes it hands you 3 idiots in fluorescent vests, trying to break into your off-grid garage. My first clue wasn't even visual. It was the sound, the faint clank of metal on metal carried on the wind as my tires crunched over the gravel, a sloppy, irregular rhythm, like someone trying to pry open a can they had no business touching. Then I saw them. One woman, tall, helmet too shiny to have ever been worn for real work, standing with her feet planted wide, prying a crowbar under the corner of my garage door like she was opening a treasure chest. Another wore a neon vest so new the price tag flapped in the breeze, hanging loose from the seam. She was holding a cheap clipboard, though she clearly didn't know what to do with it. And the third, thin as a fence post, was holding up her phone, recording like a director working on the world's worst low-budget crime film. They didn't notice me at first. They were too busy whisper-shouting at each other, arguing about leverage, complaining about the lock, and stepping on each other's feet. I pulled my truck to a slow stop, engine idling, no reaction. I slipped it into park, still nothing. That's when I started to laugh. Not loud, just one of those disbelieving chuckles you let out when reality decides to surprise you in the dumbest way possible. I opened my door, stepped out, and called out, "Hey, you ladies, the matinee show or the evening performance?" That finally got their attention. All 3 froze. Helmet woman nearly dropped the crowbar. Clipboard vest stood up straight like she'd just been caught stealing communion wine, and phone woman turned slow, very slow, like she wanted to pretend I wasn't standing 15 yards away staring right at her. For a moment, we just stood there looking at one another across the driveway. Me, the rightful owner of the property, and them, the worst break-in crew I'd ever seen. That's when my security drone hummed into view above them, triggered automatically by motion. They didn't see it, but I did. Silent, watching, recording everything. And I'll tell you this, in that moment I realized something important. These weren't just trespassers. They were HOA trespassers, which meant whatever stupidity I was looking at was only the beginning. The 3 of them stood frozen like they just realized the universe had made a very unfortunate scheduling error. My driveway, my property, my garage, and them. This wasn't going to end gently. Clipboard vest tried to recover first. She cleared her throat like she'd practiced this speech in the bathroom mirror. "Ma'am, this is a routine inspection. HOA protocol. You weren't present to grant access, so under extended jurisdiction, Pine SH." I raised a hand, slow and steady. "Stop before you injure yourself with that sentence." Phone woman swallowed hard but kept recording, hand trembling. Helmet woman, she didn't tremble. No, she doubled down. The kind of person who gets more confident the more wrong she is. So I laid out the rules. You have 15 seconds to explain why you're forcing entry into my off-grid garage on my land without cause, without paperwork, without authority, before this stops being a polite conversation. I glanced at the time, and that's when Helmet woman made her mistake. She shifted her footing, tightened her grip on the crowbar, and raised it. Not high enough to look dramatic, but high enough to be actionable. That wasn't fear. That wasn't confusion. That was intent. I exhaled once, calm as snow melt. Then I moved. I hooked her wrist, twisted hard and fast, and drove her into the gravel with enough force to knock the wind out of her. The crowbar clattered away, bouncing once before settling near the tire track. Clipboard vest panicked and lunged, but panic never improves technique. She tripped over her own boots, hit the dirt with a dull thump, and stayed there wheezing like a broken accordion. Phone woman spun on her heel to run, 2 steps, 3. Then she forgot about the shovel leaning against my woodshed. Her shin found it first. Gravity handled the rest. In under a minute the whole battlefield went quiet. I stepped back, checked hands, pockets, belts, old habits never die, and confirmed none of them had a blade or a hidden tool within reach. Then I walked to the back of my truck, flipped open the side compartment, and reached into the emergency kit I keep in every vehicle I own. Heavy-duty zip ties, the kind contractors use, the kind that don't break unless you want them to. One by one I zip-tied their wrists, not tight enough to injure, just tight enough to keep stupidity contained. Helmet woman groaned as I rolled her onto her side. "You're fine," I said. "The gravel did most of the work." Clipboard vest muttered something about miscommunication. Phone woman whimpered. "Margaret said this was authorized. She said she keeps dangerous stuff in there." There it was, the missing puzzle piece with lipstick and a board member badge. I took out my phone and dialed Sheriff Bell. "Sheriff, it's Ada. I've got 3 individuals on my property attempting forced entry into my garage." A pause, negative on me drawing any weapon, but I do have an assault with a deadly weapon on tape. Crowbar raised and ready. Another pause. "Yeah, they're zip-tied, they're breathing, and no, they're not going anywhere." When I hung up, I walked over to my porch cooler, sat down and let out a slow breath. Helmet woman groaned. Clipboard vest whimpered. Phone woman tried to avoid eye contact with my drone, still hovering above like an impatient judge. And I thought to myself, if this is Margaret's opening move, then the war she just started is going to be one hell of a story. Sheriff Bell's cruiser rolled up my driveway about 8 minutes later. Sirens off, lights turning slow, steady circles across the pines. Bell moved the way only seasoned law enforcement officers do, calm, deliberate, with the quiet patience of someone who's filled out more incident reports than birthdays. He stepped out, took one long look at the 3 women zip-tied on the gravel, and sighed the kind of sigh you only develop after 30 years in uniform. "Well," he said, nudging the crowbar with the toe of his boot, "looks like your afternoon went sideways." I shrugged. It had potential, but they ruined the quiet part. Bell circled them slowly, kneeling beside Helmet Woman. "You injured?" he asked. Helmet Woman wheezed. "Just wind knocked out." "Good, means you can talk." Bell nodded as he stood. Then he turned to me. No anger, no judgment, just that professional squint of someone already imagining the paperwork. "Ada," he said quietly, "if this woman hadn't raised that crowbar the way she did, I'd be talking to you about the zip ties. You know that, right?" I nodded. "Oh, I know. I don't enjoy wrestling grown women on my driveway, Sheriff." He grunted, noted. Clipboard vest suddenly tried to sit up straighter. "Sheriff, sir, this was an authorized HOA safety inspection. We had reports of hazardous materials in that garage. Chemicals, lithium stacks, fumes, maybe even explosives." Bell blinked once slowly. "Explosive devices," he repeated flatly. Clipboard vest swallowed. "Well, that's what she told us." I raised my hand from the cooler I'd been sitting on. "Sheriff, the most dangerous thing in that garage is a shop vac older than half the folks in Pine Shadows." Phone woman chimed in, voice cracking. "Margaret said if we didn't finish before she got back, the whole community could be in danger. She said she was cooking something." Helmet woman buried her face in the gravel, mortified. Bell exhaled long and deep. "Let me guess," he said, "Margaret Whitmore sent you." All 3 nodded so hard, I thought the gravel might file their chins down. "Well," Bell muttered, "that explains the IQ level of today's field trip." He turned to me. "You said you've got documented footage." I held up my phone. Drone caught everything, doorframe camera too, time-stamped, synced, archived. They didn't even notice the blinking red light. Bell watched a few seconds of the footage, winced, handed the phone back. "All right, trespass, attempted forced entry, assault with a deadly weapon." He lowered his voice. "And whatever else we dig up once I get statements." Then, because fate has impeccable comedic timing, the next act arrived. The sound came first. A sharp, angry clatter of high heels marching over gravel, each step landing like an accusation. Margaret Whitmore erupted from between the oaks. Sunglasses oversized, folder fat enough to stun livestock, expression sharpened to a lethal point. She didn't walk so much as descend, like a monarch inspecting a peasant uprising. "Sheriff Bell," she shouted before she was even close, "you need to stop this arrest immediately." Bell didn't turn, he just muttered under his breath, "Here we go." Margaret stormed up, heels punching into the gravel. These women were authorized personnel acting under HOA directive. You are interfering with community governance." Belle raised one calm hand. "Ma'am, these women were caught breaking into a private structure, and Pine Shadows HOA has zero jurisdiction on this parcel." "That is incorrect," she snapped, whipping open her folder. Inside was a freshly printed map that probably finished drying 5 minutes ago. According to zoning proposals from 2019, this land was meant to be included in Pine Shadows territory, meaning we have standing to ensure safety compliance. I stepped in, voice steady. "Margaret, drawing lines on a PDF doesn't give you jurisdiction. That's not zoning. That's a delusion with a print button." One deputy covered a laugh, another didn't bother. Margaret pivoted, furious. "This garage has been repeatedly reported for suspicious activity. Chemicals, fumes, dangerous equipment. Residents are concerned." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean my server batteries, my fire suppression gear, the drill press?" From the ground, phone woman whispered. "She told us it might be a meth lab." Margaret's face drained of colour. She hissed through clenched teeth. That was internal speculation regarding community safety. It was not intended for public discussion. Belle stepped between us. "All right, enough. Ma'am, you are on private property without cause and you orchestrated an unlawful entry. You take one more step toward that garage and your name goes on the report with theirs." "Silence, the kind that stings." I leaned against my truck, folded my arms and said calmly, "Save your breath, Margaret. You're going to need it for the deposition." Her jaw tightened. Belle signalled his deputies, and just like that, the first real line of this war had been drawn. After the deputies loaded her inspection team into the cruiser, the driveway finally fell quiet. Margaret stood there, arms rigid, jaw set, folder trembling just slightly. And beneath all that rage, I caught something else. Fear, not fear of me, fear of losing control. Some people volunteer for an HOA because they want to help their neighbourhood. Margaret Whitmore volunteered because she wanted a kingdom. And the truth behind that break-in didn't start today. It started months earlier. I'd begun renovating my off-grid garage that spring. New conduit, better insulation, server racks, a fire suppression system. Basic things for someone in my line of work. Nothing sneaky, nothing illegal, just the quiet, methodical satisfaction of building something right. But in a community like Pine Shadows, curiosity spreads faster than common sense. Neighbours ask me simple questions. "What are you working on out there, Ada? Some kind of tech setup? You building a generator?" I answered honestly. Most nodded politely and went on with their lives. Margaret didn't ask me anything. She asked everyone else, and every answer she gathered came back rearranged. A lithium battery became a volatile chemical unit. A fire suppression tank became pressurized hazardous material. A server rack became military-grade communications equipment. And late-night work sessions, those became strange mechanical noises at suspicious hours. Margaret didn't spread rumours, she structured them. She let a few words drip into social gatherings. She expressed concerns at HOA meetings. She forwarded second-hand comments to the board with phrases like resident anxiety increasing, potential risk to community safety, unverified reports of fumes or runoff. Soon enough, people began whispering behind my back. "Something's going on in that garage. She's got equipment running all night. You know, she used to be law enforcement. Maybe she's hiding something. I heard she's storing hazardous chemicals." I heard worse. And by midsummer, the phrase meth lab started popping up. Always quietly, always behind closed doors, but always conveniently near Margaret. One old neighbour pulled me aside at the gas station. "Ada, I don't believe what they're saying," she whispered, "but you should know. Margaret told the board your garage might blow up." I laughed at first, thought it was typical HOA melodrama, but the tone shifted. Parents hurried their kids past my driveway. Folks who used to wave now avoided eye contact. And then Pine Shadows HOA sent out a general safety memo urging residents to report unusual smells, electrical surges, odd lighting, or suspicious equipment noises near boundary-adjacent lots. Boundary-adjacent, like mine. Margaret didn't need to name me. She'd already painted the picture. By the end of summer, she had convinced herself, and a good portion of Pine Shadows, that my garage wasn't a workshop. It was a threat. But one question lingered. If she truly believed I was dangerous, running a meth lab, storing explosive materials, why didn't she call the county or the fire department or anyone with real jurisdiction? Why send 3 HOA volunteers with a crowbar? The answer finally clicked into place. Margaret didn't want the law involved. Margaret wanted my land. Those rumours weren't about danger. They were about engineering a justification. That map she waved in the sheriff's face, the freshly printed one, I'd seen earlier drafts months prior, slipped into HOA newsletters as conceptual expansion zones. Every draft had something in common, a dotted line that crept a little farther each time until it swallowed a strip of my acreage. The county had rejected Pine Shadow's expansion proposal 3 times. But if Margaret could prove a public safety emergency on my property, if she could stage an inspection to document violations, if she could show the HOA was forced to intervene, then she might convince the county to fold my parcel into Pine Shadows for safety oversight. She didn't break in because she hated me. She broke in because she needed evidence, real or fabricated, to support a land grab. Everything she'd done, the whispers, the safety memos, the nighttime drone she didn't think I'd notice, was leading to this moment. Margaret didn't want to protect Pine Shadows. Margaret wanted to expand it. And my land, my garage, my peace stood in her way. I've never liked courtrooms. Too many fluorescent lights trying to replace sunlight, too many polished benches pretending to be comfortable. But on the morning of my civil hearing against Pine Shadows HOA, I walked in with one goal, not just to win, but to make the judge enjoy ruling in my favour. The place was packed. Neighbours, HOA members, the concerned citizen types who thrive on other people's conflict. You could practically feel the gossip vibrating in the air. I took my seat next to my attorney, Melinda Crowley, a woman carved entirely out of discipline and steel. She slid a stack of files to me, tabbed, colour-coded, indexed. "You ready?" I asked. She didn't look up. I was ready before they even filed. That's why I hired her. A few minutes later, Margaret Whitmore entered the room. Not walking, marching. Chin high, spine stiff, blazer sharper than her attitude. She radiated the confidence of someone who had never lost a single argument, likely because she simply rewrote history in her own head. Beside her was the HOA attorney, all clean-shaven, suit-pressed, hair perfect, the look of someone who prepares thoroughly but clearly had not prepared for Margaret. He whispered something to her. She nodded like a queen approving a battle plan. I almost felt sorry for him, almost. Judge Margaret Langford entered. Sharp eyes, sharper mind, the kind of judge who could smell nonsense from the parking lot. She glanced around the packed room. Let's remember this is a civil hearing, not a community performance. I expect order. I swear she looked directly at Margaret when she said performance. The HOA attorney opened. "Your Honour," he began, voice smooth. "My clients acted out of reasonable concern for public safety. They received multiple reports alleging hazardous materials in Ms. West's garage. Flammables, chemicals, potential explosive risk. They proceeded with an inspection in good faith." Margaret nodded furiously, like she was trying to shake off responsibility and agree with it at the same time. Then came Melinda's turn. She rose calmly, as if gravity itself respected her. "Your Honour, before we address the claims, we'd like to establish jurisdiction." She handed the clerk a bound set of documents. "This parcel is not, has never been, and was never approved to become part of Pine Shadows HOA. The HOA had zero authority to inspect anything on Ms. West's land." Judge Langford read the first page and nodded once. "Proceed." Melinda plugged in a thumb drive. "This," she said, "is drone footage from the date in question." The lights dimmed slightly as the screen lit up. There they were, the 3 stooges of Pine Shadows, helmet woman prying like she was opening buried treasure, clipboard vest packing in confusion, phone woman filming like a shaky-handed YouTuber. Then the audio played. "If we don't finish before she gets back, Margaret said she'll have our asses." A collective gasp swept the crowd. The HOA attorney froze. His shoulders sagged. He closed his eyes and then, subtle but unmistakable, he pinched the bridge of his nose and exhaled the long, tragic breath of someone realizing he's defending a client who is absolutely guilty and catastrophically stupid. You could almost hear his soul whisper, "Why me?" Margaret, meanwhile, sat perfectly still, jaw clenched hard enough to crack enamel. Melinda continued, gently, almost kindly. "This wasn't an inspection. It was a break-in, and it was directed explicitly by Mrs. Whitmore." The HOA attorney attempted a pivot. "Your Honour, the intent of Pine Shadows 2019 zoning proposal clearly." Judge Langford cut him off before he could finish. Intent is irrelevant. Intent does not create jurisdiction. She turned her attention to Margaret. Mrs. Whitmore, did you authorize these individuals to enter Ms. West's garage? Margaret swallowed. I relayed resident concerns. They acted based on community necessity. The judge leaned forward. That is not an answer. Margaret shifted. I informed them the HOA expected decisive action. Next to me, Melinda whispered, that's it. She handed us the verdict. Judge Langford set her pen down with a soft click. I find Pine Shadows HOA and Mrs. Margaret Whitmore jointly liable for trespass, unauthorized intrusion, and willful abuse of positional authority. Margaret's attorney closed his eyes again. The judge continued. Actual damages are minimal, but punitive damages for this willful abuse of power and disregard for property rights will be significant. She paused for dramatic and judicial effect. The HOA is ordered to pay Ms. West $85,000 in punitive damages. A wave of murmurs swept across the room. And Mrs. Whitmore, the judge added, turning her gaze like a laser sight, is required to issue a public apology, unedited and approved by the court, to be posted on all HOA communication platforms for no fewer than 60 days. You could almost hear every molecule of dignity evacuating Margaret's body. She didn't look furious. She looked exposed. And people like Margaret don't forget humiliation. They feed on it and then they try to return the favor. You'd think winning $85,000 in punitive damages would feel like a victory, and for about 2 days it did. But peace on my land has a sound, a rhythm, a certain clean quiet that settles between the pines like a quilt. And the week after the hearing did not sound like peace. It sounded like a pause, a held breath, a dangerous kind of silence. Margaret vanished. Not physically, her Lexus still came and went, but she disappeared from community life entirely. No HOA newsletters, no late-night mass emails, no rants on the neighborhood forum, not even her signature, concerned citizen, alerts about trash cans being left out 20 minutes too long. Nothing, like she'd fallen off the face of the earth. And that was the first red flag. People like Margaret don't retreat, they reload. The second red flag came 2 days later. I spotted a white SUV parked just outside my southern fence line. No markings, tinted windows. It sat there for maybe 10 minutes. 2 people stepped out, not neighbors, not locals. Didn't wave, didn't introduce themselves. They didn't approach my fence or address me. They just pointed lenses at my solar array, snapped pictures, then drove off without a word. I watched them leave with a feeling I hadn't felt in years. The low, cold tickle of someone probing for weakness. On day 4, a letter arrived. A very official-looking envelope from the Colorado Department of Environmental Health. Heavy paper, government seal printed neatly. Sounded legitimate. The contents: a report alleging non-compliant emissions, possible chemical runoff and solar energy feedback irregularities. Every accusation was nonsense, but it was nonsense written in bureaucratic language crafted to intimidate. I exhaled slowly. There it was, Margaret's next move. She had realized she couldn't beat me on property law, so now she was aiming for regulatory warfare. Attack the woman through her systems, through paperwork, through agencies that don't know they're being used as pawns. Classic HOA guerrilla tactics. The inspector who eventually arrived, a polite woman in her 50s, looked almost embarrassed being there. She toured my place, took notes, checked every battery, pipe, sensor and runoff trench. After 30 minutes she sighed. Ms. West, I have no idea why this complaint was filed. Everything here is immaculate. I nodded. I know why it was filed. She didn't ask for details. Smart woman. But as she left, she gave me a look I recognized from my law enforcement days. You're not being inspected. You're being targeted. By the 5th day, I knew the truth. Margaret wasn't licking her wounds. She was regrouping. She tried to steal my land. She tried to get her stooges to break in. She tried to twist zoning law, and now she was weaponizing the state. The silence wasn't peace, it was the prelude, the soft drum roll before the next strike. And deep down under all the calm and all the stillness, I felt it in my bones. Margaret wasn't done, not even close. The week after the environmental inspector left, I expected the dust to settle, but nothing settled. It shifted. The silence around Pine Shadows wasn't peace, it was pressure. The kind that builds before a storm finally breaks loose. And Margaret Whitmore, well, she wasn't finished. She was just changing weapons. The anonymous letters showed up first. Not in my mailbox, in everyone else's. Neighbours blocks away began receiving cream-coloured envelopes with no return address. Inside were grainy, zoomed-in night photos of my workshop, blurry by design, suspicious on purpose. Below the photos was a single typed line. Do you know what's being stored in your neighbourhood? No signature, no explanation, just fear delivered, postage paid. By the end of the week, people were behaving differently. A little more distance, a little more hurry in their step. One family that used to let their kids ride bikes near my place suddenly started walking them the long way around. Head down, quick pace, no wave. That's how rumour works. It doesn't need truth, just oxygen, and Margaret was fanning it hard. Then the flyers appeared in HOA mailboxes. Same photos, same spooky aesthetic, but this time the rumours got specific. Possible unlicensed chemicals on premises, electrical anomalies near boundary zone, reports of hazardous equipment. Every line written to sound official, but vague enough that no one could challenge it. It was a classic HOA tactic. Turn an ordinary property into a neighbourhood issue, and it was working. 3 days later, the real punch landed. An HOA Facebook group post titled "Disturbing Confrontation Caught on Video. Pine Shadows Residents Beware." The thumbnail froze me mid-motion, jaw tight, shoulders squared. The kind of freeze frame that makes anyone look guilty. I tapped play and I recognized the footage immediately. Not because it was from my cameras, but because I had stood directly in front of that lens. Phone woman, the shaky-handed amateur Spielberg from part 1. It was her video, spliced, trimmed, weaponized. The first half where they were breaking into my garage was gone, cut clean, every piece showing their forced entry, their tools, their intent gone. What remained was a stitched-together clip of me taking them down, framed like I was some unhinged aggressor ambushing innocent inspectors. Worse, someone had added a voiceover, deep, grainy, fake, saying, "Come back again and there will be consequences." I never said that, not once, but in the edited footage, synced badly with the movement of my jaw, it looked real enough for the uninformed. The comments exploded. "She's dangerous, I heard she used to be military. This is scary. Why does she have so much equipment? Could be a prepper or worse." I checked the metadata. The upload came from a fresh account. 0 friends, 0 posts made the day before, but the proxy bounce was sloppy. It passed through a dorm network. CSU Pueblo, Sophia Whitmore's school. Margaret hadn't just escalated, she'd enlisted family. And then the drones arrived. Not my quiet, thermal, steady surveillance drone. No, these were cheap, buzzing little insects flown by someone with the coordination of a drunk carpenter. They dipped low over my western fence, circled my roofline, hovered over tree cover just long enough to be noticed. Twice I launched my own drone. Twice the intruder panicked and bolted south like a scared quail. Back inside, I checked my firewall logs. 5 pings, all from unknown devices, all probing the perimeter of my network. It was amateur work, but persistent. Whoever was trying to spy on me wasn't just curious, they were desperate. The final warning shot came on a quiet Tuesday at 2:14 a.m. My motion alarm beeped. I checked the camera feed and saw 2 silhouettes slipping through the tree line at my back fence. They carried something small, boxy, mounted it onto a trunk facing my garage. Stayed 5 minutes, left silently. By dawn the device was gone, but the zip tie remained, and the footprints, sloppy, careless but escalating. Standing in that morning light looking at those prints, I knew one thing. Margaret wasn't simply angry about losing in court. She was obsessed, and she wasn't just spreading rumours. She was assembling a campaign. Digital, social, psychological. A machine built from fear, ignorance and weaponized gossip. She wanted a war. She had just fired the first real shot. The morning after I found the zip tie and footprints along my back fence, I brewed a pot of strong coffee, sat in my workshop, and did what I've always done when someone pushes too far. I started digging. Not into dirt, into data. Most folks in Pine Shadows only knew me as that off-grid tech woman with too many batteries and not enough HOA spirit. They had no eye.